Okay, we're going to get started. I'm sure there are people that are going to be joining us throughout the webinar, but I am Jennifer Phillips. I'm the program lead for network collaboration at the Digital Benefits Network here at Georgetown Speck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. We're thrilled to welcome you to the first in our Summer of CX webinar series today. And our series includes 3 webinars. Today's, which is Principles to Improve CX. And on Wednesday, August 6th, we will be having a webinar on CX metrics for decision-making. And on Wednesday, August 14th, our final webinar is Improving CX for Benefits Access. If you haven't registered for the next 2 webinars, we'll put that information in the chat. We really developed this webinar series thinking all about state to territorial, tribal, and local leaders who are currently working on how to center customer experience in their agencies' work to improve digital access to public benefits. And while there's excellent information available that is coming from federal agencies, nonprofits, private vendors, we found that when talking to states that there is not as much information available about how a non-federal agency might get started on centering customer experience in their public benefits agency. Oops. So our first webinar focuses on principles to improve customer experience, or CX. I'm going to do a quick overview of CX, and then our 2 speakers will highlight how their state agencies are working on CX, what difference it is making, and then share some essential success ingredients for getting CX work off the ground. While both speakers are from unemployment insurance agencies, there are important common denominator CX elements that are transferable across public benefit agencies. We are so fortunate to welcome Mai Doe, Brett Gleason, and Rachel Carson with us today. Mai joined the California Employment Development Department in 2006 and is currently serving as the Chief Customer Experience, or CX Officer. She's leading their CX efforts as the department modernizes and transforms customer and employee experiences. She has sociology degrees from the University of California, Davis, and California State University, Sacramento, and is also a certified usability analyst. Brett Gleason is the Chief of Staff at the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency. He serves as the strategic planner and administrator, directing all communications, transformational projects, and change management. Brett has led the implementation of strategic initiatives like lean, human-centered design, and change management that are all focused on a more positive customer experience. Brett has a long history of public service, starting in 2013 at the Michigan Department of Technology, Management, and Budget as a business process consultant. And Rachel Carson is a design director leading Civilla's work to bring human-centered design into unemployment insurance and child welfare systems. She specializes in large-scale technology projects, previously leading the redesign of Michigan's benefits portal, which provides access to more than 1 million people per year. Rachel joined Civilla 7 years ago, and her work also spans adjacent systems, including Health and Human Services and the Department of State. For those of you who are new to the Digital Benefits Network, our mission is to support government in delivering public benefit services and technology that are accessible, effective, and equitable in order to ultimately increase economic opportunity. And we do this through creating peer community, offering responsive and actionable resources that are based in credible research and analysis, and the curation of those resources, projects, and implementation tools from other leading organizations. And you can find these resources on our Digital Benefits Hub, which we'll put in the chat. We also offer access to multidisciplinary experts, co-creating proofs of concept and standards, coordinating deep listening across the public benefits ecosystem, and we develop structured learning opportunities like these. And finally, most importantly, we create the space to imagine new futures for public benefits delivery. Before we get started, we'd like to cover our webinar community norms and logistics. Please note that this event will be recorded and the transcription and slides will be available on our website. Please use the raise hand function to ask questions during the Q&A or drop them in the chat. Please stay on mute unless you're asking a question. Please be kind and respectful in your communication. And if you aren't a subscriber, we encourage you to sign up for our monthly communications, the Digital Benefits Digest and Digital Benefits in the News, and we'll put that link in the chat. And to give everyone a sense of who's on this webinar, we'd like to start with a quick set of poll questions. And I'm going to launch that poll right now. Okay, hopefully people can see the poll on the screen. Vitha, can you give me a thumbs up if yep, looks like the answers are coming in. Give it just another minute. It looks like it's going up and up. Oops. Okay. Looks like we've got most people that have shared, so I'm just going to end the poll and share the results quick. And Vitha, can you give me a thumbs up that it's on the screen? Yes, okay. I can't see it as the administrator. Perfect. All right. So it looks like we've got 47% of you that are coming in from state government, 20%, just under 20% that are coming in from the federal government side, a few county and local folks, and then 30% nonprofit participation on the call today. And then in terms of the benefit programs that people are focused on, we've got half the people that are here with a focus on unemployment insurance, 13% focused on SNAP, a few folks on TANF, and then a pretty big group, almost 50%, that are either multiple programs or other programs. And then in terms of participants on the call today that have a federal grant or federal grant funding to work on customer experience, it looks like over 50% of you on the call, which is fantastic. And we're really excited to have enough time to get your questions and start a conversation towards the end. So I'm going to stop sharing that and keep going here. So just to start off, why are we focusing on customer experience and digital benefits delivery? Well, a lot of people ask the question, why can't government services work more like Amazon? Why is it not as easy to get through a unemployment insurance application like it is ordering a package on Amazon? Well, this is a question that so many of us in this work face when trying to think about improving public digital service delivery and design. The quote that's up on the screen right now is from McKinsey, and it's basically that customer experience is a function of the expectations compared with lived experience. And our research shows that when a customer's experience as a constituent, a business, or other government agency utilizing state services meets or exceeds expectations, it can boost trust in government, improve morale among civil services, and diminish negative media coverage and lower costs for government agencies. So this is really a focus on that good experience boosts trust, it boosts civil service morale, it can reduce mistakes that are made, it can lower the administrative burden on people seeking benefits, and then it can also save money. So I'm going to share a quick overview of CX slides before I turn it over to Brett and Rachel. Back in December 2021, President Biden issued an executive order on transforming federal customer experience and service delivery to rebuild trust in government. I want to share a couple of key quotes from that executive order. Government should be held accountable for designing and delivering services with a focus on the actual experience of the people it is meant to serve. Government should save an individual's time and thus reduce time taxes and deliver a level of service that the public expects and deserves. And finally, the federal government's management of its customer experience and service delivery should be driven fundamentally by the voice of the customer through human-centered design methodologies, empirical customer research, and an understanding of behavioral science and user testing, especially for digital services and other mechanisms of engagement. Much of this focus is renewed, not new, and builds on executive orders as far back as 2011. It also builds on more recent executive orders that are focused on equitable access to public benefit programs. As public benefit programs such as unemployment insurance, SNAP, WIC, TANF, Medicaid, as they're all federal programs that are administered by state, territorial, tribal, and local governments, the executive order includes instructions for various federal agencies deemed high impact service providers on customer experience improvements. The federal customer experience is the #2 priority on the president's management agenda, and all of federal government customer service experience efforts are being documented now by the federal government. Two federal agencies, the General Service Administration and the Office of Management and Budget, are working with federal public benefit administering agencies on customer experience improving technologies such as notify.gov on texting or raising awareness about human-centered design approaches to improve customer experience. And over the past few years since that executive order was issued, USDA, USDOL, and HHS have all created customer experience guidance and ramped up their efforts to help state, territorial, tribal, and local administering agencies work on customer experience improvements. This has included several waves of federal grant funding on SNAP, WIC, and unemployment insurance. Recently, USDA-FNS selected 12 states to participate in a direct certification with Medicaid. They also issued $100 million in modernization grants for WIC, and USDOL has awarded nearly $800 million to 52 states and territories for a range of modernization efforts that include customer experience improvements such as timeliness, equitable access, and fraud prevention. I'd like to give a quick overview of some of the CX resources on the USDOL UI modernization site. On August 6th, the next webinar, Sylvie Williams and I will do a deep dive on them and specifically on how to collect and use CX metrics. But USDOL has been encouraging states to employ 3 important CX principles: understanding pain points, creating feedback loops, and defining and measuring CX. This is an example of policy guidance from last November where USDOL included examples of journey maps. And these are the type of resources that we will be sharing after the webinar. USDOL also suggested certain CX friction points for states to look into. Again, we're going to go into a little bit more depth on some of these things on August 8th, but things like mobile usability, making sure that the website standards are in place for WCAG and 508, Section 508, focusing on non-digital support when it's needed, plain language and language access, and promoting effective navigation and wayfinding. In addition, a wide range of non-federal organizations are contributing to the growing awareness and the library of resources on customer experience. These organizations include nonprofits such as the Digital Benefits Network and many others, trade associations such as NASWA and APHSA, and private entities such as public benefit vendor companies and newer public benefit corporations. I referenced the Digital Benefit Hub earlier, and we'll put that information in the chat again. The Hub is home to nearly 800 different resources, case studies, and artifacts, including many on human-centered design. This is not an exhaustive list of CX principles, but highlights some of the most important ones. Most of CX revolves around understanding the wide range of customers and their experiences with applying, receiving benefits, and interacting with your agencies. Better understanding CX can improve consistency and seamlessness. It can reduce administrative burden or time tax for customers and employees. As a former state UI administrator from Illinois, we were trying our best to take in all of these resources and all of the federal guidance, but we didn't have dedicated staff yet. And we were doing a lot of things in a MacGyver kind of way, the best we could, but we were trying not to be scared of trying. One of the biggest challenges state leaders face is how to start and institutionalize the importance of CX within their agency. And Mai and Brett are going to share two different ways of building that capacity within their agencies. Mai, I'm going to pass it to you and let you take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining today. My name is Mai. I'm the CX officer at California's Employment Development Department, and our services include disability, paid family leave, unemployment benefits, payroll and tax collection, as well as jobs and training. For today, I'll share what customer experience is at EDD, a bit of our partnership between our customer experience and user experience teams, our structure, a few efforts in California, and how it's making a difference. So what does CX mean at EDD? Following the historic demands of the pandemic, EDD received legislative support for overhauling the way we deliver our programs and services with a pure customer-centered focus. It's more than a modernization project for us. It's truly a transformational period at the department. So we design with customer behaviors and motivations in mind, informed by customer research and employee feedback, ensuring access to all Californians. It's important that our customers feel heard and believe that we understand their needs. They can access user-friendly services and self-serve, and that our customers experience reliable and consistent service. And to bring that vision to life, we have a structure that continues to evolve, but includes our customer experience and user experience teams, which will be this slide right here. And then we'll also talk about a CX governance committee and committee of practice. So this slide shows, our customer experience and user experience teams, as well as their distinct focuses. But, before this looks a little overwhelming, or you may think like I don't have these resources, we'd like to share that building a full structure takes time and executive support. We started small with a small website content management team that eventually grew to a couple UX designers and then a dedicated UX team. And this user experience team we've had for several years now, but we understand that that's one aspect of customer experience. So this slide shows kind of how the user experience and customer experiences teams interact with each other. So starting with user experience, which some organizations may have first, that team focuses on specific product experiences such as usability, information architecture, user testing, and content strategy. And then on the left, we have our newer CX team, which focuses on customer experiences across the many ways a customer engages with us. So that can be calls, emails, forms, website, chatbot, surveys. And the team does so by conducting customer research, collecting and analyzing customer insights and metrics to monitor pain points and inform solutions. And our CX and UX teams work closely together with our program partners to put our customers' needs front and center. And so the next slide, you'll see who makes up the CX team at EDD. So we do have a dedicated team that helps create a customer-centric culture and builds consensus across the department. They also manage the Voice of the Customer program, which I'll provide more details about later in the webinar. And they also manage the CX governance structure and committee of practice. So our team includes a CX officer, CX manager, and specialists who work with project managers and program partners to provide CX research, best practices, and support. And we have a CX specialist dedicated to each of one of our key program areas, as well as a specialist for EDD Next, which is our modernization project. And then we also have 2 CX analysts who support the specialists and create voice of the customer reports that we provide to our execs and program leaders. And if you're interested in creating or growing your CX structure, we can share some sample duty statements with you. Okay, on to governance next. To honor EDD's customer-centric commitment, we have a CX governance committee to focus on improving the overall customer and employee experience. This group acts as an exec-level decision-making body to evaluate and seek agreement with decisions that ultimately lead to CX improvements. They prioritize strategic determinations on CX that encourage and influence positive customer journeys. They also resolve conflicts between CX efforts and budget, resource, and timeline considerations. And lastly, they support and ensure a strong CX culture that is adopted across the enterprise. So we've developed the initial infrastructure to support EDD as early adopters as early CX adopters in California, such as having the dedicated team, a voice of the customer program to improve customer understanding, and a governance committee. We also recently created a community of practice, which will help with the enterprise commitment to ensuring customers' needs and the impact on customers and employees are considered in discussions, decisions, and service delivery across the department. We've found that it's a good way of engaging regularly with representatives across the enterprise and gaining the necessary buy-in to support change. We're also fortunate to have a lot of executive leadership support on this. So members include 1 to 3 CX champions from each EDD branch, and then 4 executive sponsors who provide feedback and help remove roadblocks. So some examples of the community's practice objectives are to define the vision, target customer and employee outcomes, design principles, and roles and responsibilities to deliver on CX. The committee will also work on metrics, training, and resources for staff, and processes for customer and employee feedback loops and prioritizing enhancements. We understand that some organizations may not have the funding or structure for CX, and the community of practice may be a good way to pull together some existing resources to infuse CX best practices into your organization. So you've heard me talk about voice of a customer a few times today. So let's dive a little deeper into what we're doing in California with our Voice of the Customer program. So part of our pledge to evolve in a very customer-centric way, we developed this program that started during the pandemic and that at the time focused primarily on unemployment and listening to customers from 2 touch points, social media and chatbot. And it was aimed at helping us identify and act upon customer feedback. Since then, we've expanded to include more customers like employers, job seekers, and those receiving disability and paid family leave benefits. And essentially what a Voice of the Customer program does is it monitors customer experiences across the many ways a customer interacts with us. It helps us identify pain points, trends, and successes through collecting customer experience and satisfaction data. It helps us better understand our customers to design and deliver services that align with their needs. And lastly, it helps us measure the effectiveness of our improvements. So let's take a look at Voice of the Customer in action. An example of what monitoring customer feedback and how it helps us is last year, we launched a new portal to our online benefit services designed to better support self-service and improve security with multi-factor authentication. A few days after the launch, we noticed several comments on social media, which we verified with customer call center. A small percentage of customers were encountering a stuck spinning status while they were trying to register. Based on the comments collected and shared, our IT team was able to quickly identify and fix the issue before it became a larger scale problem. Next, let's take a look at some new surveys that we have as part of our Voice of the Customer program. So getting customer feedback from our customers is very important. And a few weeks ago, we started offering more surveys, such as in our offices and our website. Our goals for the survey at a high level are to better understand our customers, their needs, and expectations. We had questions to ask them about their reasons for visiting an office or website, and then their satisfaction with services and interactions. We're also going to get data about what's working well and opportunities for improvements. The surveys are available in English and Spanish, with more languages to come. And then we'll be looking to expand our Voice of the Customer program to include feedback from other customer touchpoints, which will help us develop a trend analysis across the customer journey with EDD. Next, let's look at some research and testing efforts. Excuse me. Before applying CX principles to designs such as the MyEDD portal, we conducted usability testing early in the design process to ensure that MyEDD is easy to use and accessible. We tested with customers and advocates of varying ages, genders, and geographic locations. One of the most influential findings focused in on multi-factor authentication, which would be new to our customers. The plan had been to have customers download an app through a QR code to log in, but the process for enrolling in the app proved unclear and frustrating even for the technically savvy customers. The customer quote on the right shows our findings. And in the end, we were able to improve the design by ensuring the multi-factor authentication aligned with customer expectations, which is more a text, call, or email rather than having to download a third-party app. Another example of research, our efforts include redesigning benefit applications to create the optimal customer experience. We reviewed the original application with customers, advocates, and EDD staff to understand the existing customer and employee experience. We made proposed content changes to the applications based on research, expertise, and industry best standards. We tested the proposed content updates, then analyzed the feedback to refine the updates. And then lastly, we drafted a proposed version of each application for unemployment, disability, and paid family leave. Our goals were to improve the forms, streamline claim processing, and improve the customer experience. This was our most comprehensive research we've done to date, and we can use these findings for other projects when time or resources are limited. There was more than 4,500 hours of research and testing, and more than 75 participants, which included past claimants, potential new customers, advocates, and EDD employees in public servicing offices, and those that process claims. We also engaged with our legal office, language access office, and program and policy experts. So this next slide will show how we used the research to develop and apply recommendations to our proposed solutions, which included removing questions, rewriting content in plain language, and defining terms that were misunderstood or difficult to understand. We grouped light content with sections and headings. We also reformatted response fields where possible, and we replaced open fields with selectable options and asked them to choose which applies. Using these recommendations, our draft or proposed application updates reduced the total number of questions from 156 to 74 for unemployment and 46 to 30 for disability. Please note that these numbers are based off a future solution, and we aren't able to fully implement the proposed applications now. But we wanted to deliver changes to our customers sooner, so improving the online unemployment application with what we can do now, and that will be available to customers this fall. And then we're aiming for 2025 for our disability and paid family leave applications. And then the slide you see here is some of the feedback we got from our testers on the draft solutions. So after applying the recommendations, we tested our proposed updates with potential new applicants and EDD employees, understanding that additional testing is a critical part of the iterative process. So one of our testers said, it just makes it clear that your eyes go exactly where they need to go. It's not hard to read at all, which is nice. And then EDD employee that processes claims said, I think applicants would be less likely to make mistakes. So this feedback from potential applicants and EDD customers are promising, and we're looking forward to implementing the changes, starting, like I said, with the online unemployment application this fall in the 8 languages that we support. We've also worked closely with California's Office of Data and Innovation to set up Google Analytics so that we can get baseline data on application completion times, pages, questions where people may drop off or where they may use help text. And then we'll compare that data to what we collect after improvements are made to measure the impact. So this last example I went over, like I said, was our most comprehensive research effort to date, And we understand that not everyone may have dedicated CX and UX resources, and project schedules may limit time for research and testing. But we've found a way to infuse CX into efforts, which takes us to the last slide, which are key factors of CX. As you're creating or growing your CX or UX structure, we found it helpful to have a champion working closely with executives for the needed support. Also, legislative funding for dedicated resources, either in-house or through a vendor, to research and infuse CX principles into service enhancements. In California, we're in the middle of a modernization effort and updating our IT systems. So part of our budget request included a work stream for CX. Another key factor is having some ways to get feedback so you can influence service design and measure improvements. This can be a voice of the customer program, getting a vendor to do some quick usability testing with customers, and or sitting down with some employees that either answer calls or process claims. We started with vendor support in California for customer research and testing while we work to establish our CX team. So it's possible to start small and grow as you're able to share data that support the CX improvement efforts taking place. So I know I shared a lot today, but wanted to emphasize that the structure we have shared with you took time. And we're continuing to grow our CX efforts. For example, we're a large organization, and spreading a CX emphasis across the enterprise is something we continue to work on, along with iterative testing on service enhancements and ensuring there's time for testing in all projects. I appreciate your time today. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to the Michigan team to share their story and CX efforts.
So thank you, Mai. Hi, everyone. We are calling in from sunny Michigan. We're excited to chat with you all. I'll pass it over to Brett to kick us off.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks, Mai. For Michigan, customer experience means thinking about new and better ways of doing business and serving Michiganders. At the Unemployment Insurance Agency, we serve people in times of crisis, and good CX means doing this in a way that puts the user experience first. I believe that government has an opportunity to lead the way here, and that is what we are doing at the UIA. If we get it right, we have the opportunity to positively impact both Michigan workers and businesses. We are embracing a holistic customer experience-focused approach to service delivery, recognizing that the overall customer experience is significantly influenced by the multiple iterations an end user has throughout a process. For this reason, our projects encompass a wide range of initiatives, from office renovations designed to create more welcoming and efficient environments, to plain language initiatives that simplify communications and enhance understanding. We also offer online coaching sessions for claimants to provide personalized support, and we are implementing a new system to streamline operations and improve service delivery. Each of these efforts is aimed at ensuring a seamless, engaging, and responsive experience for our customers at every touch point. Good CX recognizes there are different, unique barriers to service for each customer. It compels us to abandon the one-size-fits-all approach, and we have learned that going on-site, we gain insight, which is why we launched the Community Connect program to expand efforts in underserved communities by seeking new partnerships with community groups to support them in assisting their members with unemployment-related issues. The program provides regional community liaisons to work closely with community, faith-based, or cultural organizations across the state to identify individual barriers and provide equitable solutions for expanding access to unemployment assistance. Our approach to CX aims to create seamless and responsive interactions between the government and its constituents by leveraging human-centered design (HCD) methodologies. I'm happy to report that over the years, Michigan's approach to change has evolved to be much more inclusive of end users and program stakeholders. When I first started in state government 15 years ago, there was a statewide project to reduce 50% of forms and to eliminate questions that were not explicitly required by statute or administrative rule. So essentially, each department organized internal teams of process SMEs and attorneys to crosswalk every form to policy line by line. The thought was eliminating bureaucracy would simplify processes and reduce the wait times, which it partially did. However, when the measure of success is jurisdiction, we got rigid results that prioritized government's aversion to legal risks, and the customers were left with unclear, dehumanized processes. For the better part of my career, I managed the state of Michigan's process improvement program housed inside our centralized IT department. My team certified process improvement facilitators and facilitated process improvement projects. To mitigate automating inefficient processes, departments were, and they still are, required to review and redesign processes using the state's standardized methodology for modernization projects costing more than $2 million. For these projects, the teams reviewing and redesigning processes consisted of internal, cross-functional team members representing each function of the process and leveraged SMEs like attorneys as needed. At the time, the inclusion of cross-functional internal roles was very countercultural and led to significant outcomes. In addition, customer focus groups were conducted to identify process issues and ideas for project teams to consider when redesigning the process. This approach was a significant improvement, but we learned over time assumptions and paradigms can cause misalignment with customers' needs and limited innovation. The engagement with end users in this model just wasn't enough. So now fast forward to UIA, and you can imagine my excitement working with an HCD firm that spends as much time, if not more, dialoguing with end users and testing prototypes as they do with process SMEs. Since partnering with Sevilla, a nonprofit design studio based in Detroit, we have greatly enhanced customer access and navigation by publishing tools designed to support customer interactions with the agency. I want to invite Rachel, the design director of Sevilla, to walk us through some of these impactful tools that her and her team have designed to help us tackle our challenge. And the challenge that we had in Michigan, when we sat back and thought about our program, the claimants and, employers, the challenge is the experience of accessing the unemployment system is complex and time consuming for claimants, employers, and navigators.
Great, thanks, Brett. So yeah, with this challenge in mind, together our team and the leadership team at UIA decided to look at what should be our primary areas of focus. And we landed on two areas, one being the website and second is correspondence. And we decided these areas based on the fact that this is how customers are most often interacting with UIA. And so this is where we have the largest area of influence and impact. So we did a lot of research over the last few years with claimants, with employers, with staff, with leadership. And through these conversations, we ended up developing these design principles. And these design principles have guided a lot of the work that I'll walk you into. And so, yeah, I'll just walk you into these briefly. The first design principle is simple. So using consistent, plain language, clear guidance, and visual hierarchy. It might sound simple, but I'm sure everyone on this call knows it's not simple to actually do this, especially when your system is, legal. There's a lot of legal requirements, a lot of policy requirements. There's a lot of, there's a way of working that really forces back on this principle. But I think we all agree that this was something that the agency really wanted to strive for. The next principle is clear expectations. So helping customers know when and how to take action. So both on the website and in the letters, we found that, folks, they have a lot of questions like, am I eligible? How do I determine if I'm eligible? And we all know that it's a very complicated process to determine eligibility. And that's not something we can always say clearly up front, especially in the beginning. So we wanted to identify what can we tell customers and to give them some clear expectations to guide them. So maybe that's, this is when you have to send the information by, these are your due dates, this is the submission information, here's the next steps. So looking at where can we provide clarity amidst a very confusing system. And then the third one was just in time. So we wanted to provide information that is most relevant to customers' immediate needs. We found that often on the websites and even in letters, there's all the information you might need is in one web page or in one area of the website. But it's just a lot of information to sift through when maybe as a customer, I'm in this one particular moment, I just applied, I just need to know what's next. So we've been making efforts to look at providing information to customers just in time, or just when they need it. So instead of in this one letter, maybe we're distributing it or we're delivering it at a later point when they actually really need it. So it's been really amazing to see Brett and Julia have taken these principles and disseminated them across the agency to help guide decision-making and how the agency is interacting with customers. So it's one thing, you know, to develop something, but then it requires leadership, like influence, momentum, and really dedication to see it through. So I'm just going to walk you into a few quick case studies of how we've applied the design principles in partnership with UIA. So this is just a few screenshots from the website for UIA. There was, you know, lots of different links to take you to different FAQs and handbooks and help pages. But we found when we were talking to customers that it was just very confusing still. They weren't sure how do they actually, you know, determine their eligibility, apply, like what does the process actually look like? And so through many hours of research and testing, we ended up developing a claimant roadmap. This is a step-by-step walkthrough of the unemployment process. It serves as a single source of truth and can guide users through eligibility, application, determination, and the certification process. So this is on the UI website now if you want to take a look at it. Shortly after launching, it became the most visited page on the website, and it still maintains that status. So we know that it's a really popular resource for claimants to use to understand how to apply, how to submit their application, how to review what letters are coming, how to certify, and how to update their information. And then what we heard from claimants about the resource was, well, I feel a lot less intimidated by it. It's resources for me. It's not just a scary government website. It's something that can help me get back on my feet. So for claimants like this one, you know, traditionally websites and, you know, information provided from an agency like UIA can be really intimidating, and it's not actually very helpful. So it was really great to hear that this is a resource that folks can start to use and to really leverage in a time of need. So in building off of the success of the claimant roadmap, we wanted to look at the other side of the coin, which in Michigan is employers. We know employers play a really critical role in the process for claimants to get access to benefits. And so there's over 270,000 active employers registered with UIA, and they employ nearly 4 million Michigan residents. And we heard a lot of challenges employers were having understanding the system. They might have been, you know, small businesses or a medium-sized business. They don't have a huge amount of HR resources, and they found the letters super confusing. They couldn't figure out how to get in touch with UIA. There was just a lot of common questions. And so we developed basically a microsite called the Employer Help Center, and it serves as a centralized hub for employers to efficiently manage the most common unemployment tax and claim issues. And we had some feedback from HR professionals and employers. They said, thinking as a seasoned HR person, this is a really good breakdown to give to someone who may not understand. I can't remember ever seeing this in my career. So even for folks who've been in HR for a long time, it sounded like in our conversations with them, it just felt like a really common pain point of like, how do I navigate this system? And so the Employer Help Center has become a resource for them to figure that out. So in addition to the website, we've also just about to wrap up some work on some key correspondence with the UIA. We identified a number of letters some of the most common letters and the most confusing letters that go out to claimants and employers. And we did an extensive research project to redesign these letters and apply a number of the design patterns that we've used in many of our partnerships to make it as clear and simple as possible for folks to be able to understand and understand what's being asked of them. So here's an example of a monetary determination letter, just the top one, the former letter on the left side and the new letter on the right side. There's about even on this page, there's maybe 20 different design decisions that were made, from the title to the bolding to referencing them to different parts of the website. So there was really very extensive testing done on each and every element of this letter. I just want to share one part of the letter that you might not be able to see. This is just an example, as Maya shared earlier too, about plain language. You know, we worked really hard on updating the language, and we worked with an amazing legal team at UIA who was really on board to make this change. And so I just want to share one example. So in the old letter, it said, the new or additional evidence provided warrants a reversal in the prior determination. The previous determination is reversed. You had not received prior warnings. Evidence has not been provided to establish misconduct. You are not disqualified for benefits under MES Act Section 29(1)B. And so we changed that to, based on this information, we've determined that you're qualified for benefits. So there's many more examples like this in the letters, and it's not just as easy as crossing things out. We know it took a lot of work behind the scenes to work with a team that was really excited and really like understood the vision and understood the value of making these changes. So that's just one example. And here's a voice from a quote from an employer who said, "This letter is one of the most concise government documents I've ever received. I like the fact this letter was separated into different pages for different types of information." Yeah, so these are just a few examples of some of the key projects that we've worked on with UIA. We found, there's a lot of learnings we'll go into a little bit later, but we found that focusing on some of the most common the places where the folks are interacting most commonly with UIA can make a huge impact, and having just a really great dedicated team that's all on board really makes a difference. So I'm going to pass it over to Brett to talk a little bit about some of the ingredients that lead to a successful CX project.
Thanks, Rachel. To achieve a successful customer experience project, we've identified 4 essential ingredients: vision, leadership, resources, and partnership. These elements work together to create a foundation that supports effective and impactful CX initiatives. So going down the line, the first ingredient is vision. A clear and compelling vision sets the direction for the CX project, outlining the desired outcomes and the impact on end users. This vision should be customer-centric, focusing on enhancing the overall experience through innovative and thoughtful solutions. It provides a roadmap for the project, guiding every decision and ensuring that all efforts align with the ultimate goal of delivering exceptional customer service. A vision statement doesn't have to be fancy. It can be simple and very straightforward. So the vision statement that we used for our HCD work that Rachel just talked us through was create a faster, simpler, and more human-centered process for interactions with customers in Michigan. And that's what we used to get us started. Moving on, the second ingredient is leadership. I know Mai talked a lot about leadership, and Rachel as well. So I'm just going to touch on a little bit more here, with a special focus on the importance of active and visible sponsorship. Strong leadership is vital to driving any transformational project forward and maintaining momentum. Active and visible sponsorship from top leaders ensures that the project has the authority and the support it needs. Sponsors who are actively engaged and visibly committed to the project can effectively champion the vision, inspire and motivate the team, and secure buy-in from all levels of the organization. This level of engagement demonstrates the project's importance and fosters a culture of continuous improvement and customer focus. We're incredibly fortunate in Michigan UIA to have a naturally charismatic and compelling leader who sponsors transformations and sponsors them well. For those who don't, and I've worked on a lot of projects where I didn't have that resource, it's essential to invest in training and coaching of these leaders to help them develop these skills. Additionally, implementing a clear sponsorship plan can provide guidance and support, ensuring that the sponsoring leaders can effectively champion the projects and inspire the teams. And then it goes without saying, but the third ingredient is resources. Adequate resources, including time, budget, technology, and personnel, are essential for successful execution. If you are able, then ensuring that the project is well funded and supported with the right tools and expertise allows for thorough planning, efficient implementation, and the ability to address any challenges that may arise. If resources are tight, then it's important to manage expectations and target maybe some low-hanging fruit, or something we've done in Michigan is targeting key interactions earlier in the process that establish the customer's experience and their narrative, to give a good baseline for subsequent interactions they may have down the process. The final ingredient is partnership. Collaboration and partnership are key to achieving a holistic and seamless customer experience and can expand your access to resources or expertise. Engaging stakeholders across departments and states and working closely with external partners and vendors ensures that all aspects of the CX project are considered and integrated. Partnerships facilitate knowledge sharing, foster innovation, and help to identify and address potential gaps in the customer journey. By clearly defining the vision, providing strong leadership, allocating the necessary resources, and fostering the collaborative partnerships, Michigan has been able to significantly enhance customer experiences across several key stakeholder groups, claimants, employers, and we're actually about to start some new work on really building out some resources around our navigator groups. And we've been able to ensure outcomes are not only successful, but sustainable and impactful. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Rachel to learn more about human-centered design.
Great. All right, so then we just wanted to close up our time with you all today, sharing some of the best practices we've learned for adopting HCD inside of public institutions, and these apply to our partnership with UIA, but we've also seen these apply across different agencies. One thing that we've noticed at Sevilla is that HCD is inherently disruptive to the way that work is typically done within institutions, and this might resonate with many of you on the call. So yeah, I think it's something that you might often look at it as a process for problem solving, but it's not only that, right? It's also just a completely new way of thinking about and approaching work together. And so with any type of change, sometimes adoption within institutions is difficult. If you think about even changing something within yourself, it's hard to do. So imagine changing it obviously with institutions will be very hard. So given this, we don't recommend a few things, and then we do recommend a few other things. So I'll start with what we don't recommend, which is trying to do too much too fast. So if you think about boiling the ocean, you know, in Michigan, we didn't try to do the claimant roadmap, the employer help center, and all the letters all at once. You know, we picked one thing. Another thing that we don't recommend doing is bringing high visibility to it. I think it could be very easily crushed under expectations early on. So we often say, be, do, say at Sevilla. So we try to do things first, try to show the success of it first, and then we'll see what happens after that. So if you're trying not to bring too much visibility up front, because there could be other things that surround it. Another thing we don't recommend doing is training up everyone on the staff. I think, you know, it's also similar. We start small, and so we look at where are the low touch, high volume touch points. And so if there's a small team or a certain group of individuals that you can start with, then that is often more successful than trying to, you know, change whole agency's way of doing things. So those are a few things we don't recommend doing, and I'll just shift into what we do recommend doing. So yeah, I think this also kind of speaks to some of the things that have also been mentioned through Mai and Brett, but like they have both shared, starting at the top, strong executive leadership is critical. Yeah, and I know Brett also mentioned that you don't always have that, and so that's not always possible, I think, but this is something we've seen consistently leads to really successful implementation of CX and human-centered design projects. Another key best practice we've seen is a tight scope on a key domino. And what we mean by that is you're starting with something that people can easily understand. So you're picking one specific artifact. You know, Mai talked about the application. For our work, it was focusing on the claimant website resources. So it's something specific that people can hold on to, and it has a really large impact. If you can change it, it will have, you know, reverberate throughout the agency. And so we try to always just pick one specific thing to start with, and show and use that as a starting point. Another piece of it is empowering a core team. So we look for how do we develop a cross-functional group of individuals that can create air cover, and leadership creates air cover for this small group of individuals to make progress. So in our case, for this work in partnership with Michigan, we have a core working team, and these are individuals from legal, from customer experience, from all across the agency that have a direct impact on the work, but it's just one person, it's not multiple people. And so we have, you know, 8 or 9 people meeting weekly in a meeting that they're all like, you don't have to convince any of these people the value of it. They get it, and they're like on board to start making action. And so that has been really essential to making sure the work goes through. And then another best practice we have is committing to implementation. So ensuring that the user voices are brought all the way through. You know, this is really just a central ingredient to the work. Is if you want to bring forward strong customer experience, then obviously the users have to be at the center of that. That's not just in the early phase, in the discovery research, or in a few testing sessions. It's literally from day one to the very end of the project. It's constantly bringing in the user voices and constantly gathering feedback. And then finally is using proof points. So we use proof points to show what's possible and demonstrate how the impact this work can have and how it can expand to other projects. So the few examples I walked you in earlier, we started with the claimant roadmap. That was an initial proof point on what HCD can do inside of UIA. Then we did the employer help center, and then we did the key correspondence, and then UIA has done many, many more things outside of that. But there's a value in people seeing, oh, okay, I understand this one thing, this roadmap, I understand how it worked, I understand it worked, I see the impact, so I can understand what can come next. And so by really having a high value proof point, you can get a lot more people on board with the work, and it really accelerates the rest of the projects that you do later on. So yeah, those are just a few best practices that we've learned in our partnerships that we wanted to share with you all. And I will stop here and pass it over to Jennifer. Thanks all.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Mai, for this amazing discussion. We've already got a question coming in. I also threw into the chat, we'd really, like, as we pivot into the Q&A part of this call, we would really like to hear from the states who are on this call, like, what are some of the key challenges that you're facing when you're either doing or starting CX work? And so we kind of thought about this section like an office hours where you can ask some of the experts. I can also put my former Illinois hat on and talk about some of the things that we were trying to do and CX. But I'm going to start. Ben has a question from Pennsylvania, from Allegheny County. It's for Mai. You mentioned that identifying the issue with the blue dots in the social through open comments in the CX surveys. Which party is responsible for identifying issues in open comments in a timely manner? And as you scale, do you have automated ways of alerting people about possible problems? And then the third, Mai, you can probably see these questions in the chat too. Are you using any natural language processing or NLP methods to identify themes in unstructured data? And Ben, after Mai goes, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the survey work we did in Illinois and using natural language process methods. Mai, you want to take it away?
Sure. Hey, Ben, thanks for the question. So we have the resources. Luckily, we have a digital marketing team that monitors social media comments for us every day. And then the platform that we have, we can set up alerts. So if there are specific words or certain terms, it alerts us either through email or Teams so that we can go into our social media platform to look at it a little bit more. Our survey tool is slightly newer. We just onboarded Qualtrics, which is our voice of the customer vendor for that. So we are setting it up. So right now, one of our CX analysts goes in and reviews all the survey comments every single day, primarily for just kind of ones that require a little bit more immediate attention. And the benefits of a voice of the customer program is to try to get that more real-time data so that we can respond, especially when it comes to IT fixes before it starts to flood our call centers. But we are looking for our surveys to find a more automated way to alert. And then we have partners within program areas, whether it be in the IT area or in our communications area, to help us. So we have folks in communications areas that will also help us with drafting really quickly social media responses to people's inquiries. But essentially, we do have dedicated resources for people to monitor our social media comments and our survey comments on a daily basis. And then we're looking, of course, to automate that more so that we can be alerted. And then also the same with being able to look at the unstructured data. We are trying to do that for our Voice of the Customer program right now so that we're not relying so heavily on manual processing or staff resources. Did that answer your question, Ben, or do you have any follow-up?
No, I was just typing. Thank you. That's a really detailed answer, and thanks for letting me know where that is kind of positioned in your work, because I think that's sometimes confusing about like which stakeholder is responsible for monitoring these things. And
Ben, this is Jen. In Illinois, we didn't have like the the same type of digital marketing analyst positions, but we did have Illinois, sorry, I should use better pronouns. Illinois started a point of time survey at the end of the online UI application in April 2020. It was a 10-question voluntary pop-up survey that came up after you press submit. And the response rate for that survey on a weekly basis is around 8%, which is not bad. And by the time I started at the agency in 2022, there were over 200,000 responses during that time period. So it was a really huge set of data. And there were several open text response questions. And when I came to the agency, no one had looked at that data, right? So it was a huge natural language processing question. And USDOL and a former colleague of mine, Justin Lay, actually helped write Python script to help us look at that open text. And now, and we'll be talking about this a little bit more on August 6th, but now on a weekly basis, a team at Illinois Department of Employment Security is actually looking at those responses in an analyzed way, right? So you can see where, just for instance, like if a part of the website goes down, you can see the responses that people have of not being happy with a certain part of the website. And you can immediately kind of say like, okay, let's get on top of this, kind of like the blue dot issue. Let's get on top of it before it becomes a bigger problem or a bigger pain point.
Cool. Thank you.
So we have a question from Luciana. Do you want to voice over? I should actually offer. Do people want to voice over their own questions? It's a small group, or I'm happy to read them.
I don't mind reading my question.
Perfect. Take it away.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, I'm from Oregon. There's two of us here, and we're really excited about this conversation. Really excited to see some of the ideas that are happening. We had a question about the notices. I love the language that was used to update some of the language, but we do wonder how we're managing the legal language requirements. We have a lot of like legalese language because of potential hearings and because the state has been sued, and so I think there's this ultimate like fear of missing language and how that could cost the state long term. So how was that conversation when you were adjusting language there?
Brett, do you want to take that? Like, because I thought it was
Yeah.
so fascinating that you were talking about your previous experience, like and like looking at forms and letters, and then having it end up being so focused on the jurisdictional level, and then the pivot to what you guys are doing now with Sevilla and being able to say in one sentence, and having sort of a CFA kind of like you're covering yourself legally as an agency.
Yeah, this is a battle that Rachel and I still fight today with legal. Legal they're our best friend, and they're also, sometimes the hardest to educate that, when it comes to like plain language, they're not the right people to hold the pen. And so what Rachel and I have been doing with our HCD projects is that, we're getting research from the field, we're meeting with core team members who are SMEs within the business area, and we're inviting legal into the conversation, but we're being really clear about articulating the role that they have in the conversation. So in Michigan, historically, the attorneys, because of so many lawsuits, we're constantly in litigation. There's so many legal battles. People have been in this agency for like the longest tenure of state employees that I've encountered in any other principal department. And so there's a history that comes with that, then you pull in the pandemic, and, there was this like crisis management 3-year period of their lives where, things were just very contentious. And, so all that to say, like, you have to be careful, you have to be mindful of really creating legal's role, but also like understanding the baggage that people are bringing into the conversation. So that's what I really appreciate about HCD and the approach is that it's, you're you're talking about a change at the individual level, but it mirrors really well, like it accompanies really well change management when you understand that a change in an organization happens at the individual level and kind of accompanying and walking staff through that. But for legal, you know, I find that you have to, you can shop around if you can. You know, you'll find attorneys who understand the opportunity, you know, that might be within a project scope. And so there's different methodologies that different attorneys will bring when interpreting statutes and law. And so getting strong sponsorship to help carve the paradigm that the attorneys are meant to come to that dialogue with, and having that leadership support. But then at the end of the day, over the years, just picking up different tips and tricks to challenge when, you know, for an example I'll use is, and Rachel, help me out if I don't get this right, but we had a form titled like a redetermination. And in statute, it says specifically what has to be in that form. But that form goes to both an UI, a claimant, and an employer, because they're both stakeholders in the outcome. But the letter is actually for the claimant, but it's a notice to the employers. So we suggested changing the language of that, the title of that form to be a notice for employers, right? So it's like it's a notice of change or something. I forget specifically what it was, but legal came back and they were saying, nope, it has to be a redetermination notification, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, point to me in the statute where it says the form has to be called that. This is that form. It has all the required information, but the actual statute doesn't care about what the form itself is actually called. So as long as we can like have our statutory citations that were aligned, and you know, like we've found those to be some successful strategies. And at the risk of rambling, I'm going to pull back and see if Mai or Rachel or anyone else has anything that they want to add.
Yeah, I thought that was great, Brett. I think just to add on to that is, yeah, like everything in the letters, it meets all legal requirements. And so as Brett was saying, like we try to have the conversation, what is the actual legal requirement? Instead of having them interpret it, we ask what the legal requirement is, and then we propose language, and then there's a back and forth. So yeah, it's definitely a dance. It's like you propose something, you find the legal requirement, we like draft a whole new design, they red pen it, and then we go back and we propose other ideas. In addition, another really important part in that dance is also user testing. Like, I think once they say they propose this certain language, and we like, well, we tested it, and this is what the results is, that we have quote, like people did not understand what they meant. It actually had the opposite outcome, or, you know, that's often what happens is that, you know, they're coming in with a good intention of like, we need to keep these legal requirements, but then the impact of that on users is not always what they are imagining. So I think understanding like what is the actual legal requirement, proposing different language, and then testing it has been a really helpful tools in addition to what Brett shared.
And I'll just jump in, Mai, if I can for a second. When I was leaving Illinois, we were embarking on correspondence changes similar to Michigan, similar to what New Jersey Department of Labor has done. And two things: one, we put we created a cohort of the legal team that had to like be on the correspondence change team, right? So that they were there from moment one. And one of the things that I'm not sure if it's finally landed or not, but thinking about some of the legalese similar to like a Babel notice, so that you can have everything like exactly the way it is in federal and the state Illinois UI Act, but have it in a separate place, but have the call to action in the correspondence be a lot more clear. Mai, did you want to jump in on this?
Sure, I'll add a little bit. Thanks, Brett, Rachel, and Jennifer. I think a lot of what I was going to share, you three covered. We actually experience sometimes a lot more pushback on the language from program areas than legal. And we've actually been able to leverage legal to help with the interpretation of the requirement. So sometimes program may interpret the law as we have to say it this way, and will actually help, and legal will help actually define what actually needs to be on the notice. And we've been able to do certain things like maybe use some specific language, and this is for obviously digital, link to a URL or a web page with a lot more information. So the notice or the screen doesn't have to have that wall of text. Like if you want to learn more about what this code is, go ahead and go to this, but we try to just provide the information that they need to complete their task, and of course legally cover us with the least amount of information on that page. And then another thing we've, partnership with legal and program area is a big one. And then we also have a work group or committee at EDD that just started in the last year. And it has representatives from all the program areas as well as our legislative and legal folks. And essentially the goal is to basically like question all the laws and regulations to date and policies. Like what are maybe some barriers or maybe ones that were created decades ago that are actually going to prevent us from delivering for CX or modernizing. And so one of the things we did was ask the group to look at laws, regs that prevent plain language, that say that we have to specifically use certain language. And it was an exercise for everyone to just really start thinking about, like, are these kind of myths or just things that we are used to and we just have always used this language? And how can we maybe challenge and change our way of thinking or our change of communicating to customers? So that work group has also been really helpful because it's just made people think about CX and then the way we communicate really differently, and then hopefully adopt plain language a little bit more.
And Maya, you're bringing up a huge point that I'm guessing all three of us have faced, and other state folks on the call have too, and that's like the mythology busting, right? Like thinking about that, and Brett, that leads me to think about some of the change management work that you've been doing in Michigan. That both Brett, you've talked about the importance of executive leadership and championship. Could you talk a little bit about, like, you shared with us when we visited about the email that Director Dale sent with those design principles, and sort of talking about how how you're kind of breaking up those myths through helping bring employees along.
Yeah, so the design principles that Rachel had shared with, just in time, simple, plain language, our Director Dale, sent that out in a message to all staff, and we printed them and had them placed on the desks of every staff member. So that way, and I actually have mine right here. This wasn't staged. This is actually just like sitting on my desk here. And I have a whole pile for, we hand out. But we gave them to our IT vendor who's on board. Deloitte is, our IT vendor for our new UI modernization system. So we made sure that they had these principles, because that's how we want them to inform every decision that we're making. And, especially when it's a design that and a customer is going to interact with. So just a way to keep reinforcing that messaging. And, what a great call in to say, like, it's sometimes the business area needs some encouragement. Because for our forms redesign, we had the 50% forms reduction project was a completely different administration, 10 years ago or so. And so, the way that Michigan has evolved and in processes and technology, there's just a lot of ground we've gained, and we have a forms process team who didn't understand that the executive order of a governor 10 years ago isn't actually still in effect. So when we were pulling the procedures team in, they were still under the assumptions that we couldn't have any other items on forms that weren't specifically listed in statute, which is still partially true, but like the rigidity of that executive order is, it just isn't in effect anymore. So there was some like re-education with the with the procedures team and some of the legal team about like we can start thinking differently. We're not constrained by that executive order anymore in that same way.
Thanks, Maya and Brett. I'm going to ask Jen Snow Vargas from Arizona. Do you want to voice over your question?
Oh, sure. Well, it wasn't a question, it was more of a comment. Yeah, so I was just kind of responding and saying that we're in the process of implementing a new client portal for all of our programs, kind of leveraging a lot of the work that sounds like Michigan and others have done so far. So that's fantastic. One of the things that we're playing with is we know we need to revise our notices. It's a monumental task because we have 60 different programs from all over the board, and our UI ones are especially complicated. But to make it easier for our clients, we are tinkering with the idea of using kind of like an AI generated voiceover or video that would basically summarize the notice in plain language and potentially in other languages too. So that way it's kind of personalized for that individual client and hopefully gives them exactly what they're looking for without having to sift through a bunch of paperwork in the background.
And Jennifer, just a question back to you. How are you like, are you using CX data that shows certain pain points with certain notices to decide like where to start and like what to put in that content, that video content?
So we are just getting there. We have been using a lot of our CX data to inform what our portal is going to look like. And then this is one of the features that that has come out of that. So we haven't gotten too far in it. But I do think that we will be kind of starting with our like heavy hitter notices and then like, hey, you've been applied or you haven't been applied and those types of things. And then we'll kind of break it down from there.
So for the states that are on the call, I asked the question earlier and we'd love to hear from you. Does anyone have any challenges that they want to share? Anybody just getting started have questions for Rachel and Brett about how they're financing this work? I think offered sharing some duty statements. Any kind of structural logistic questions that people want to get out here? Looks like we have one question from Dylan. When it comes to CX, what is a relationship with Deloitte? Do they have experts on staff that understand HCD? Is it an uphill battle to do CX work with a vendor, like a big vendor? Do you want to take a stab at that one?
So I think when lessons learned from Michigan, just let me start with some lessons learned. UI post-pandemic, very political. It was a topic of conversation. Everyone was interested in UI. Everyone was talking about it. And when our RFP went out for a new system, it's difficult when you're in that environment to have a really thoughtful and like RFP, like statement of work that goes out that is going to be when it's driven by politics. So I would say in hindsight, lessons learned, if you want to be really intentional about CX, if you want to be really intentional about HCD, incorporate that into your statement of work and your expectations with the vendor. We didn't. So anything I'm about to say, like, cannot be used in the court of law against Deloitte, right? Because like we didn't ask them to do that and we're not paying them to do it, but we have partners like Sevilla. We have other partners with other vendor groups that we're working with who have done a lot of research for us and are continuing to do research for us. It's not just those best practices principles that, like I held up. There's more learning that we have, and we can look at the claimant roadmap that Rachel walked through, and we can use that as the foundation and the basis for how we want the system to be structured, the dashboard, because we know we want claimants interacting on the website and learning about the program and filing to be able to have consistency across those two different interactions, right? So Deloitte has actually been a really great partner in taking feedback, in the state government, and I'm guessing most states are like this, like procurement is so rigid. So we pretend like we do agile, we pretend we do these like, but really it's all kind of waterfall upfront, this planning, but then you do these like agile like iterations. And so Deloitte has actually been really great in hearing our thoughts on like the dashboard and how their system currently looks and being able to like look at our tools like the claimant roadmap to make some enhancements. And we have some enhancements that timeline wise are going to be bigger, and we need to really think through them, and we want to have intentional research. So they're going to be enhancements post go live. But Deloitte has been a really great partner and seen some quick wins. You know, they have their system for UI specifically was recently implemented in Colorado. So we've been partnering and extending, you know, we've been partnering with Colorado and Deloitte to like do some lessons learned on their dashboards and some newer tools like a pizza tracker, status tracker. And so we can learn from them. So just kind of, you know, reiterating, be intentional about what you want up front in your procurement processes, and then build those partnerships and, you know, like create those collaborative environments so you can learn from each other. And we've found that our partners are like really likely to like want to get on board with that.
Thanks, Brett. Somebody had mentioned Jennifer Pelka's book in the chat just a second ago, and it made me think of something from that book that hit home for us in Illinois, related to really understanding CX and how it relates to vendor relationships and procurement. And that is that in many ways, like inside our agency, we needed to take ownership for knowing, right? And if we pushed everything out to the vendors that we were working with, we were running the risk of not having like an actual continuous improvement feedback loop inside our own agency, because we were so dependent on like information coming from the outside, like information going out, being digested and coming back in, rather than like how Mize described like how they have built up the structure, like where it sits in the organization, actual, you know, staff that are focused, like a team of staff focused on this, and then how it interacts with the product part of everything. I mean, this is where, you know, in Illinois, we were like, oh, we need to get to where California is or where New Jersey is. So I'm curious on like for other folks in the call, like does anyone else want to share sort of where they are in the journey of building their internal capacity? Quiet. Maybe before we close everything out, just a kind of a final question to Mai and Brett and Rachel. Thinking about like decision points and like focus areas, I'm guessing that you are looking at highest friction, highest demand, like these points, like correspondence, portals, like the multi-factor. What's the decision-making look like in terms of like how to start? And to Rachel's point, not taking on too much at once. Mai, do you want to start and then we'll kick over to Michigan?
Sure. I'm sorry. See if you can repeat that. So starting a team or starting with decision making and
Starting
elevate.
with the decision making. So like how you guys decided to start in the places that you like thinking about multi-factor. Was that a decision made up front? Was that a reactive decision to like when you started to see the problem on social media?
Okay. Yeah, for multi-factor authentication, it's always a balance with our security teams and our fraud prevention teams. Of course, we want to defer fraud. And of course, we want to make sure that, you know, benefits and services are accessible to the folks that need them easily without jumping for hoops. So it's always that delicate balance. It usually starts with good discussions with the teams, and where possible, I think like what Rachel was saying earlier, if we can test with real users, that always helps, because that tells us what, you know, a real user may respond to. And if we don't have time, then we kind of try to bring in and test with an employee who's not related to this project to see how they respond to. And then ultimately we have our CX governance committee, which helps us with decision making when we can't on a project. And the CX governance committee also helps us with prioritizing as well. So often if we have a lot of competing priorities, which I imagine every state does because all of our plates are pretty full, that really helps. And then also the data. The data tells us also what are kind of the primary customer pain points that we want to, you know, dedicate our resources to first. And then if I could just pivot real quick to one of the questions, or just to continue with kind of what Brett was saying before about like procurement and vendor relationships. our CX and UX teams also provide requirements for projects and procurements. And then often we also have one of our folks on the evaluation team. So on top of building it in the procurement language, we are usually part of the evaluation process as well. And then we often ask for there to be a CX lead. So like projects may have like a project manager, an OCM lead, a data lead. We'll tend to also ask for a CX lead so that there's someone there who's responsible for HCD.
That's an excellent point. Brett, do you want to talk about like how you guys landed on some of the priority areas?
Yeah, sorry, I was like fumbling to get my mute button off. So, you know, for us right now, we're in a season for UI at least where we have access to resources, funding from DOL and grants. And so we've taken a lot of advantage of a lot of the different grants that DOL has made available, equity, Tiger Team grants, for example. And so that's really informed the type of projects that we've taken on, as well as the high impact, high volume. So the correspondence letters, you know, we had double negatives because, you know, you probably saw that little language blurb that Rachel shared that said you are not disqualified. Well, that's how it's defined in statute. So you're not actually, there's no definition of qualified. So there was like, we couldn't say in our letters, you're not qualified. You're like, you are qualified because it's actually, you are not unqualified. You know, so it's like, there was just such an obvious opportunity for the forms in plain language that it was like a no-brainer to tackle. And then, you know, like there's a lot of required, so we want to make sure that we're compliant. And so there's a lot of required, you know, we had a recent state act pass on language access. So we need to have like translations. We need to start prioritizing having correspondence and our systems available in Spanish. So of course we're going to like prioritize, you know, to be in compliance. But something that we've done too, I think really well in Michigan is just be really adaptive and like responsive to the changing environment. You know, when we first actually partnered with Sevilla to do work, one of their outcomes was going to be redesigning the portal in our current system. Well, then we were going to, because of DOL resources and, you know, and other, you know, resources that were made available to Michigan through the legislature, we decided to modernize our system out of our like timeline. So we needed to be prepared to like shift and just kind of be agile and responsive to the, you know, our changing environment. And then I love that about having a CX expert on procurement. We've done something not for procurement similar, but we've identified a DEI and a HCD lead to sit on some of our governance committees, because I think a risk for government sometimes is sacrificing customer experience for an efficiency, a process efficiency. So we've kind of plotted some of these people on teams, committees, governance committees, to make sure that we're not, as a state, losing focus of needs that aren't our own, right? Because we just have a long history of doing that. And so that's a practice that we've taken up.
Thanks, Brett. Well, I would like to just have a huge thank you to Brett and Rachel for joining us today as we're wrapping things up. And we hope that you will consider joining us on Wednesday, August 6th, Eastern, at 12:30 Eastern time for our second webinar, which is CX metrics for decision making. One of the things that we're hoping to do on that webinar is just show how improving CX can actually potentially reduce costs, reduce mistakes, provide ways to point the way to high priority projects that states want to work on. And we just put the registration link in the chat. So we really thank you for spending your time with us today. We hope that you'll stay connected to Digital Benefits Network on social media. We're going to put the subscribe link right now for our monthly digital digest and news, and hope that you'll stay connected. And again, just a huge thank you to everybody on the call today, and we hope to see you on August 8th. Thank you.